because they sound really cool. But let's talk about for vocals. The number one type of microphone that I'm going to recommend to you if you had to buy one for your vocals is a condenser microphone. But there are different types of condensers. There's small diaphragm, there's large diaphragm, there's ones with different polar patterns. They can get really confusing. At its basic, what I would recommend to you is a large diaphragm condenser microphone. You don't need multiple polar patterns, just a standard cardioid large diaphragm condenser. Okay.
So to create a new audio track, we either press Command and T, or we can press right click and insert audio track. We can also do that from the create menu up here. Once we've got our audio track in place, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the input output window down here. We're going to show or hide that pane, so we need to see it. And we can see we've already got some audio coming in here. But what we do is we go to external in and we can click configure, and this allows us to configure in our preferences. We could also get there from the preferences as well. And we can select whatever microphone we want to use. In this case, I'll keep it simple and use the built-in microphone. So we can now close that down. And we now have the source coming in, but we can't hear it because we're not monitoring it at the moment. So monitoring basically means listening back. So with off, we're not going to hear it at all. With it on, that's in, we're going to hear it all the time. And with auto, you only hear it if you have the record on. So you'll be able to hear it now, and you won't be able to hear it now.
What's inside this vocal template is my lead vocal bus, background vocal bus, and harmony vocal bus. Everything I would need to track vocals and hit the ground running. So I'll just click, drag that right into my project, and that's going to equip me with my lead vocals, verse, pre, chorus, and bridge lead. Background vocals, I'll typically just start with 8 tracks if I'm going to do any stacking, and then some harmony vocals. And these are already routed with the input for my, my 1176 compressor, which the vocals are running through. And they just start off with having a gate on each of the bus. So what I'm going to do is kind of give you a little bit of the process. So before I start recording vocals, I start, you doing good over there?
Yeah.
All right.
It's so good.
Just hold on, just breathe. So before I actually start tracking vocals, I key map my global record button here just by holding Command K. And I key map that to my number pad 3. It's just an old Pro Tools habit of mine. I used to work in Pro Tools and track vocals there. So I can just simply hit the 3 on my number pad, and that begins the recording process. So we're going to start with the verses. Cool? All right. So in this case, I'm going to highlight the verse, Command L, just to loop that section there. That's the section we're going to start working on. And I want to give the artist a little bit of leadway. It's really hard if we just started right on the dot of like, yeah, for real. 1, 2, 3, go, get started. So I'm going to give her about a 2-bar count, and then she comes in. But what we're going to do is I'm going to let Ableton Live punch automatically, which means it's going to start recording at the beginning of that loop bracket here. So I'm going to make sure that my auto punch in is enabled, and I'm going to go ahead and put the loop on so that it just continuously loops that verse. So we'll just loop verse 1 for a while, let her get warmed up, get a couple of takes, but the key is always be recording. Never just wait to get her warmed up and then, or that person, the artist warmed up and then record. You always want to capture any performance. So, all right, so let's.
And the vocal, as you could hear, is dry as a bone, aside from our auto-tune. So we'll actually just start with that because that is always going to be your first plugin. Now, nothing too fancy is going on in here. You basically pick how affected you want your vocal to sound here. And since this is really more hip-hop leaning, I actually pushed it closer to 20. 20 and up, I'd say, is like hip-hop territory. And then pop music would probably be like maybe 20 to 50. And then A major for the key. Because there's and then this is an alto tenor part, so I picked that. That's really all that's going on in auto-tune. And once you have all that locked in, just go ahead and copy it down onto all your other channels, just like I did. You may want to bump up your background vocals a little bit more tuned than your lead vocal. You can kind of get away with that, and it'll help tighten them together a whole lot more. So now, the first thing we're going to want to do is set up some compression. We're actually just going to drop our first compressor straight onto our lead, and that's going to be Ableton's glue compressor. And we're just going to apply some modest compression here. Little makeup gain to bring it back up. And now this is way too much compression for a vocal, but it is the perfect amount of compression if you're using it in conjunction with the uncompressed vocal. And the way I'm going to set this up as a parallel chain instead of just an insert is by hitting Command G on the plugin, and it turns it into this audio effect rack. And then you just right click and create another chain below it. And you can call this compression 1. We're actually going to be doing a couple. Let's call this our dry signal. And
Hey, yo, Mr. Boombox, can you give me something right? Give me something right now. Hey, yo, Mr. Boombox, hey, can you move my body right? Move my body right now.
that's sounding more.
Me.
I like to low cut Kara's voice around 70. That's generally a number I choose for females. Unless they have a really bright, thin voice, I might low cut it at a higher number like 80. If it's a male, I might low cut it at a number like 60, but 70 tends to be my default position. And when I'm using the Ableton EQ, definitely the steeper roll off. Next, I want to duplicate this EQ, and we're going to do, instead of a roll off, we're going to do a low shelf. And we're going to do this low shelf gain at about -3. We're going to put the Q at about 12 o'clock, 1.5. And let's have the frequency be 3000. Taking the whole spectrum and tilting the lows down and the highs up a little bit. And instead of boosting the highs, we're just going to boost the output gain a little bit since the highs are really untouched.
I know you're waiting up for me, but I don't want no bad intentions.
And without it.
I'll only let you next to me.
And with it.
If you're serious, serious.
Next plugin I'm going to load up is RVox. I like to use it so that the attenuation hits at about -6, and then I usually have to bump this just a little bit above where I bring down the compression.
I know you're waiting up for me, but I don't want no bad intentions.
And without it.
I'll only let you next to me.
It's about the same volume.
If you're serious, serious. Oh, if you're
Grab an Ableton saturator, and I'm going to drop it after these EQs before the RVox. I think I want to remove the lows, do some distortion, maybe about 6, and then -5 on.
I know you're waiting up for me, but I don't want no bad intentions.
And without it.
I'll only let you next to me. If you're serious, serious. Oh, if you're
The next thing that I want to do is a little bit of multi-band dynamic control. So I'm going to grab the OTT preset that comes here with Ableton, drop it on here, and let's start out by taking the amount knob down.
I know you're waiting up for me,
We only need a little bit of
but
this.
I don't want no bad intentions. I'll only let you next to me. If you're serious, serious.
The next plugin that I want to load up is a little bit of parallel compression, glue compressor, and I'm going to hit Command G on the glue compressor so that we can put this in a rack, create chain, and let's go ahead and dial in some slower attack like 10, and let's do a faster release, maybe not all the way fast, and let's do the highest ratio they can give us.
I know you're waiting up for me, but I don't want no bad intentions. I'll